What's going on, everybody? Gentleman94 here. Welcome back to Ben Builds and part 2 of my Kylo Ren Lightsaber rebuild. Last episode, we ripped this sucker apart, and here are all the pieces and parts that we have. We have the emitters, we have the top and bottom ring, plus the two halves of the lightsaber hilt itself. Now today I wanted to come back in, clean this up, pull off this red wire here with my Dremel, and come back through and take off some of these labelings. I'll be using the Dremel 200. This should be perfectly suitable for this type of work. It is a 2-speed Dremel. Here it is. I have a grinding bit chucked into the end of it. I might switch over to a cutting bit, but let's try the grinding bit first, see where that gets us. Now I'm just going to be working here along the wire itself, and I'm going to just kind of go very slowly, bit by bit, take it one step at a time, and just slowly grind down the red wire itself. Now the wire is really cool. I like how it looks, but the fact that it's molded into the plastic kind of detracts from the overall look of it. So this way, this can take this off and I can replace it with an actual 3D wire. Really, this grinding bit is taking things off decently, but I think I might need a little bit more bite. So I'm going to switch to the cutting bit and see how that works. Okay, I've switched over to the cutting bit and it is actually a big improvement. I've been able to take off the majority of the center section relatively easily. And I'm going to be moving up to the top, and then we'll have to deal with the little step, and then of course the wire when it goes into the lightsaber itself. Now the wire is decently shaped, but yeah, like I said, it's molded in and it's poorly painted. So I want to just replace it with a certain type of gauge of wire. I'm not sure what gauge I'm going to use, but we'll get to that part a little bit later. Okay, so the wire is removed. I'm going to use my jeweler files now. We're going to go back through and start cleaning up the mess. Now the Dremel took things off decently, but I wanted to make sure this is clean and smooth. I'm going to have to rescribe some of the lost detail, but it shouldn't be too horrible. I mean, I've done this before when actual modeling, so this should be easy, right? Should be no problem. I'm going to use my jeweler files, come in, sand down the burrs, make the edges smooth. I also want to clean up the little step right here that goes from the handle up to the crystal emitter and all that type of energy area right in the top of that thing. So this is going along fine. I mean, I'm not seeing any real problems yet. But then again, we've just started and, well, we'll have to see how this all goes when I start putting it back together. Okay, so I wanted to go ahead and rescribe this area right here where the wire used to be. The lightsaber itself has these kind of grip type things running along parallel to the shape of the hilt. And I wanted to go ahead and rescribe these things so that this looks a bit better, a little bit cleaner. So I've drilled out the hole, we removed the wire, I've cleaned up the area as best as I can, and yeah, it looks decent. It looks decent enough, at least. So now I need to find a wire that will fit through that hole, and I can stretch it down all the way to the bottom, and then tuck it up into the bottom of the hilt. And then I'll secure it with maybe some epoxy or something down there. I do have to also figure out some of the actual metal parts that would secure the wire to the lightsaber. We have to figure that out. And I may just use something simple like, a piece of aluminum tape or something that's going to give it the impression of that at least. But back together, it looks pretty clean. I've went over it with sanding paper, and I think this is going to be just fine. Now, speaking of sanding paper, I wanted to go ahead and grab some of my jeweler files and sandpaper and go over these raised details, like the wording, that says, property of Disney and all that, Hasbro and all that stuff. I want to remove all the writing on this lightsaber and just make it just a basic hilt with no markings on it that, isn't actually meant for the lightsaber itself. We can do that with a couple of different tools, of course, jeweler files, sandpaper, and I'm going to use a hobby knife, and I'm just going to drag the blade across the lettering and just whittle down slowly to the bare finish. Also some sandpaper. I have 150 grit sandpaper here it's scarring up the plastic quite a bit, but I've got a couple different versions of sandpaper that should be able to kind of, tone down the scuff marks and get it looking decently smooth. But overall, this lightsaber doesn't have a lot of markings on it, but it does have a few that you really should take off. It might detract from the overall look. I really do kind of intend on using this as a prop lightsaber that I will hang on my belt as Kylo Ren here for this Halloween. But after Halloween, I'd like to also put it in my display case, just as kind of a, static prop. I think that would be really cool to do. And plus, Kylo Ren's lightsaber is pretty sweet. With those vents, with those little quillen blades that come out, it's really fun. So just to give you an example of the type of writing here, I wanted to remove this type of stuff. And we can use the hobby knife to just kind of scrape it across Same thing with this right here. I wanted to just scrape this off. Use a hobby knife again. We can also use the jeweler file, which may be better in this particular instance. So we'll just scrape this across and slowly sand down all of the raised letters. We don't need them. They're just useless and they detract from the overall look of the lightsaber itself. So I'm just going to sand these down, and then I'll take some sanding paper and we'll start going over it with some sandpaper and try to get these as smooth as possible. Now I wanted to go ahead and clean up the edges too, because when I put this back together, I want to make sure that the seams are mitigated, are hidden as much as they can be. I have a couple different jeweler files that we can use here. One that has this very sharp blade to it, and I can kind of go along the edge here. This is coming along. I mean, I have to admit, the cleanup part of this is going to be probably one of the more time-consuming elements of this lightsaber rebuild. I do have to go ahead and make sure that this will go back together, and I have to scratch build, the emitters and the side vents and the lower portion that hangs out there by the bottom of the hilt. That also has to go together as well. So it fits together decently. I've been able to clean up majority of the lines and get this thing looking decent enough. The side emitters will go on something like that, and I think this will look pretty cool. Once we get that wire in place, get the cap on the bottom and the ring on the top, plus the emitters on the side, this is going to look pretty awesome. It's going to be a project well worth my time. So let's talk about the bottom section right here. Now, there is a part that sits up inside on the actual movie prop that is, I think, some form of power coupler or something, they say. But this ring here is actually incorrectly hollow. We need to have it have a base. So I'm going to use some cardstock styrene, and we're going to put a base on this thing. I'm just going to use a simple piece, draw a circle, cut it out, and glue it together. Then the internal part is going to be something I scratch build, and I have an idea for that. This is what I've come up with. Now, these are just some pipe fittings that I pulled off an old electrical box and some other type of coupling. And I've been able to kind of screw them together, and it gives an impression of what I'm trying to go for, but it's not 100% accurate. But I'm okay with that. See, this is all it is, just 4 little parts. So let's go ahead and put this back together, and I can show you what I mean. So we have the top cap right here. Screw that on. And I'm going to have to prime this, of course, when I get it all ready to go. And we have this some sort of locking nut. Put that on. And we have this as well. Let's put that on there. We can actually put it up inside. It'll look something like that. I think that gives it a really good industrial look. And we can go either one, really. This way or the other way. Both work for me. But I do have to remove these pins right here, because these are useless. I got to cut these all out. And to do that, I'm probably going to use some flesh cuts or something. Like these snips will work well. And I can just go in there and I can just start snipping away at the plastic and get this more or less cut all the way out. Then I'm going to have to come back through and take my hobby knife and just slowly work and slice off bit by bit as I get this more or less cleaned up. It doesn't have to be perfect though, because I can actually blank this off if I really need to. Or I can, it's way up inside. You'd have to really look. And once I get this all cut out and I put in, the bottom section there on the hilt, no one's going to see it. If you end up doing this, guys, I would caution you to be very careful with this part, because if you slip, this plastic is very hard, and to be able to cut through it, you need a lot of force. So if you tend to use a hobby knife and it slips and you end up cutting yourself, oh boy, that would not be fun. So go easy, go slowly, and just take it section by section. And overall, this is a decent little build. I don't think it's going to be too bad. Once we put it back together, we'll see just how it ends up unfolding. But I think for now, this is pretty decent. So the pommel itself is just a simple piece of cardstock. I've drawn a little circle around this, and I'm going to cut this out with some scissors. That should be good enough. And then we can glue this guy onto the bottom of our pommel, giving us a nice blanked off appearance. Doesn't have to be perfect, because I can come back through with a file of some sort and smooth it out and fair it into the bottom. But it's going to go something like this. Again, it's not 100% movie accurate. The movie version has a little bit of an indent cut out right there, but I haven't made that. Now, I don't know if my plastic welder is going to work for this type of plastic. I don't know the type of plastic that this is. I'm not sure if it'll actually hold, but we're going to try it. So far, it seems to be holding all right. I don't know if it's, like I said, really bonding or if it's just kind of bonding. I don't know for sure. But I'm going to put a liberal amount here all over the seam area, trying to get this thing to secure itself. And then I might take some super glue and get some super glue from the inside to kind of help really make sure that this stays on. And yeah, there is a couple more details we could put on this, but we haven't done it right yet. Maybe eventually if we decide to go that distance. Now, once the glue has dried, I'm taking my sanding block here and I'm going right along the edge, and I'm taking off any of the overhanging, cuts or burrs or anything like that to get this nice and smooth. And it's actually working out very well. It doesn't take much sanding to take off some of this styrene. It can be eaten pretty quick by anything, that's rough in the sandpaper world. So I'm going to go slow and I'm not going to push too hard. I want just enough to take off some of this. Once I get the majority of it off, I can take my jeweler file, come back in and hit the areas with a more delicate effect. And this is what it could come up with. And yeah, it's on there. It looks good. It's sealed off, so that's important. And I think overall, this is a very, very good little part and simple fix, very simple fix. We'll have to do something similar with these and have to build in the emitters or something. And I don't know quite how to do that yet. I'm hoping the modeling gods will speak to me when I get to that point, and we'll see what we can come up with. So for now, we'll just put those aside. This is where we're going to stop for today, guys. I need to figure out some of the emitter sections. I need to figure out a couple of the other parts and pieces, but I think more or less this is looking good. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Tune in next time where we'll work on the emitters and try to get this thing all spick and span and ready to go back to a lightsaber form.